Hello and welcome to the Opus Well Style podcast. My name is Iván Watanabe here with my partner, Evan Wohl. Evan, good afternoon. How are you doing?
Good afternoon. Doing great. How are you?
I'm doing all right, minus some of these technical issues we're having here, but we're on and we're going to have some fun.
It's all seamless as far as the audience knows.
That's right. Exactly. Well, we're excited to have back on Jorge Aguilar. Jorge, thanks for joining us again. You know, post our last conversation, we were unfinished, right? We wanted to continue the dialogue. We had a lot of things that we were excited to continue to talk about. I know the audience is going to get a ton from it, so we're excited to have you back onto the podcast to kind of, learn a few more things.
Thanks for having me, guys. Happy to be here.
Awesome. So for the listening audience, if you haven't tuned into the last episode just yet, Jorge is a sports psychiatrist and associate professor. Super excited to have you on again, just to kind of have a part two to our last conversation. Awesome. So, I thought what we would do is sort of pivot the conversation a little bit, less maybe individual success around athlete and mentality, but more of like leadership and team structure and perhaps maybe how that kind of translates in the corporate space. So our listening audience, a majority of them are either entrepreneurs or executives and work either by themselves but a majority of them are probably working within an organization and trying to figure out a way to either grow in that organization or expand that organization or improve it. So just curious, from your take, kind of where the cross section happens between athletes and how they are improving an organization and how that could translate over to the corporate space.
Yeah, this is a fun topic to talk about. So, as sports fans, I'm assuming, most listeners of sports fans, we can all, think of an example of a player who thrived under one coach or regime and not another one. And I think that's not limited to athletes. That's true for all performers. If the conditions are right, I think I think that the possibility for success and for thriving can be maximized for anyone.
Yeah. We had Jeremy Zoll, the new general manager of the Minnesota Twins, on a couple months back, client and friend of the firm. And we talked a lot about culture inside of an organization, how to, as a new GM that was kind of brought up through their system, how to enhance and improve an existing culture, and what kind of responsibility that is for the head of the snake. And so just curious, how important you find culture to be, and different ways that you see people improving it, or mistakes that people are making. Maybe they're trying to put too much of their footprint on it. Just curious kind of what your thoughts are.
Culture is huge. Culture is everything. It's the only thing. It's everything in between. It's easy to imagine any performer in a culture where things are suboptimal, and they're just not going to see much success. And the opposite, you can have somebody that historically has underperformed and then put them in just the right environment where the culture is just right for them, and now they're through the roof. And so putting your finger on that pulse is huge as a leader of an organization, of a team, and getting the buy-in. So that's the magical part, right? Getting the buy-in from everybody in the organization to be a part of this culture, which is well defined. It's not easy to do, but lots of people hit it just right.
I think of the first two people that came to mind just totally randomly was Nick Saban and Bill Belichick, as far as just winning and at the highest level for a long period of time. And neither of those guys, and there's obviously many examples, but neither of those guys are what you would consider to be players, coaches, or friendly of any kind, right? They're, at least as far as what I can see from the outside, They don't seem to be like, I compare them to like Aaron Boone, the current coach of the Yankees. Everybody loves Aaron. Aaron would never speak poorly about any one of his players, even if they're struggling. And, it's just constantly the same question comes over and over again. And so, I guess, there's many different ways to lead and create culture. And, I'm sure what works in one group with one group of people may not work with another group of people. But those two coaches set a great culture and clearly had buy-in for a long period of time. But they didn't focus on, having people like them. So I'm curious how important you think it is, not necessarily buy-in for the culture, but that, they're on the same page and they feel loved on and cared for from their leader.
Yeah, those are two legendary football coaches that we may never see one like them again. They're all a little different, but I think you're tapping onto something really important here, Evan, and that's that there's different, the different types of cultures that a team's leadership can establish. I think we can roughly put them into different buckets. There's the don't mess up bucket. Don't mess up, don't mess up, don't mess up. That's fine, better than nothing. Then there's the winning culture, win at all costs, right? Sports is riddled with that one, right? And then, believe it or not, there's an even higher one, in my opinion, and that's the leader that knows that. And this is going to sound controversial here, but winning can be overrated. I'll give you an example. Some people would rather lose by a little bit to a humongous opponent than win against an easy opponent because of what that says about them and their team, right? So it's not everything. So what is a higher level than that winning mindset, that winning culture? I think it's the growth and excellence culture, right? That we can all get better. We can all continually improve, and that we're striving for excellence here, which is different from perfection. The don't mess up, I have to be perfect, because that's just unnecessary and unhelpful pressure on everyone's shoulders. Whereas where everyone is striving to, for that 99% success rate, I think you play more free, you perform more free, you're more willing to take risks, you're more willing to do something new that might lead to a profit that was not accessible previously.
Right. Create in that sort of win at all costs, perfection mentality. I feel like you really lose out on creativity, right? You lose out on new opportunities, where, again, just sort of what comes into my mind at that the winner at all cost mentality is doing the same way, sacrificing all else. I don't know. I like, if you looked at Bill Belichick's old mentality in coaching today's players, I don't see that working. I just think that today's, older generations will call newer age athletes soft, but they're just different. They value different things. They're thinking about different things. It's not just about winning at all costs, but it's at winning at all costs, but also making sure that they are taking care of their families, having a well-balanced life. I'm not saying that those things weren't, present at some level, but I feel like the definition of success has shifted a little bit in today's environment. At least it has for me. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe I'm looking at it differently, or that's just where my eyes are trained. But I find it to be different definitions today than they were in the past.
Yeah, I agree with you, Iván. I think over time, we're gonna see less and less coaches like them. And there's that said, these two coaches you guys are talking about have accomplished incredible things. So, they had a formula that was very successful. That said, I'm going to go out and venture and say that there were still a couple of people in all of these organizations that were not thriving under that leadership and could have been under a different leadership. And so I think the question we have to ask ourselves is, what's the leadership style or culture that's going to be most effective and efficient, that's going to cast a wide net and bring the most people along with us. And I think culturally that's been drifting a little bit each decade, and it's now less fear based. It's now it's less of let's get this donkey up the mountain with a stick, and more of let's get this donkey up the mountain with a carrot.
Yeah.
And we'll have a healthy, happy carrot up there, and it'll get there probably just as fast as with the stick.
Yeah. I mean, as I kind of hear you talking, what comes to mind for me is identifying what you want the culture of your organization to be. If you were at a leadership, role, right? What would you like that to look like for you? Again, I think Evan and we've designed a culture within the organization which is very much carrot, not stick, right? But that doesn't mean that the stick doesn't work for some organizations, right? So you can create an organization and have it be however you would like that culture to be, and then hiring to the capabilities and the desires of people that actually want to be in that culture, right? And if you're an employee, finding an organization that fits where you would like to work culturally, right? There are some people, again, that thrived under Bill Belichick's regime, that's an organization that they would prefer to be a part of, versus others that would want to take a different approach, that would want to come work with myself and Evan, right? So, I think being clear on what that is about, or what kind of culture you're looking to establish, seems critically important.
Yeah, I think so. And maybe it's a question for both of you. So obviously step one is get clear on the culture, on the values. And I think, some people are just going to say this is what it is at the top and everyone deal with it. And if you don't like it, get out. Some people are going to get feedback from everybody and say, what are the values that we care about? What are the culture? What's the kind of culture that we want, as opposed to top down? But I guess the question that I'd like to ask you guys is, how do you think, because if we're hiring for culture as opposed to hiring for skills, because most skills can be taught, what do you look for when you're hiring for culture? Do you just spend time with them and see if you gel, or what do you look for when you're hiring for culture?
I think for me, right, for the folks that have been, the thing I care about the most is that they care about our clients. Like, they put our clients first, right? They understand experience. They understand doing the right thing. They have integrity. Mm-hmm. Those are the things for me that are like critically important. The other things, as you said, you can kind of teach along the way, but I can't teach somebody to care. I can't teach somebody to put our clients first. I can't teach somebody to, if they say they're going to do something, to follow up on it and sort of have like core values that align with my core values. Like, that's the thing that I care about the most. So, somebody may say that, and again, you'll kind of figure out relatively quickly if they're, real around those things or they're not. I think that, we've let people go in the past fairly quickly that were not a fit to that core value, right? So for me, that's where you start. I couldn't imagine, I don't know, Jorge, what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I think if we use the metaphor of the success of an organization, a team, a corporation, as a plant, then, as the leader, you're the farmer, and there are things you can do as the farmer to help any plant thrive, right? I can think of half a dozen things you can instill into that soil to help that plant thrive. That said, the plant's got to do its job too. And one of the things that I have seen help folks thrive is when they can align, when there's alignment between their personal values and the organization's. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not saying that a team member, an employee, should forcibly bend their values to be parallel with the organization's. I'm saying that if any of us take stock of our values, right, 3, 5, 6 of them, chances are a handful of them are already aligned with the organization's, right? Let's say, like Iván, you mentioned integrity, right? Perhaps what you bring to the table is that you think transparency and clarity and just fairness is really important to you. Maybe for the organizations as well. And so maybe you can have your work be aligned towards promoting that, fostering that in the organization. Maybe it's your own commitment to excellence and being excellent every day. So as your organization, it's in your team. It's striving every day to be the best that it can be. Or maybe it's growth. You believe in one day being sub 1 hour in that competition you're going to do this weekend,
There we
Iván,
go.
right? And so is your organizations. It's always striving for growth. And so finding those alignments, which is partly the responsibility of the leader as well, with clarity. This is what's important to us, and asking your potential hires what's important to you, and so that both can see, hey, there's this nice alignment here. We can make some wonderful things happen.
Yeah. It's interesting because I don't know if you follow Gary Vaynerchuk, but Gary Vaynerchuk, pretty popular personality in media, and he talks about running his companies and having a very clear understanding of culture and working really 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 hard to, if somebody's not a fit, to actually help them go find a role somewhere else. Or if he feels like they've outgrown the company, to go help them find that business that they're going to start. I think nowadays there's in today's society, like I really like the fact that people are getting more in tune with their appreciation of a company's culture, right? And if it's not a fit, going to find an opportunity someplace else, and hopefully they're with an institution that maybe can help them go find that better fit somewhere else. But there are options, and I've never seen so many people go on to a different company or go search for another opportunity. People aren't staying with their company for 18, 20, 25 years anymore, right? They're moving around every 2 to 3, and I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but searching for a better fit, I think, is much more prevalent today than it has been.
I mean, if you can find people, if you can enroll people in the values and the culture, I would much rather have a team that we stick together for decades than constantly having to find new people and train new people and, readjust the culture or kind of make sure that they're continually, evolved in the culture going on. And so one thing I found to be really helpful is making sure that everyone is very willing to have difficult conversations about what is true for them, what is true for me, what is true for us as a team, as a culture. Because if someone is just not feeling it, or they're feeling attacked when it was really just, hey, I needed you to do something differently, it's important to be able to receive criticism and just be able to, speak your mind. And the people that I have found, the people that can't receive criticism or take it as a defense mechanism, put up a defense and say, hey, I did this for a reason, and, put rationale behind it. Those are the people that just are probably going to always be looking for the next thing every 2 to 3 years, because they're going to have a hard time, diving into the culture and actually being part of, feeling like they're part of it.
Yeah, it sounds like those are people that still have some self work to do.
Yeah.
To not get defensive when they're getting feedback. Evan, I think what you're saying is scientifically backed, actually, right? We call that psychological safety. It's the ability of members of a team to be able to tell their leader, hey, I've messed up. I made a mistake, and not fear a big consequence coming from it.
Yeah.
Right? That helps the organization. Or level that up. Having a team member tell their leadership that I actually disagree with you. Right? Or I have a concern here. I have a dissenting opinion here.
Yep.
And not fear the consequence. That helps an organization flourish.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, but that comes with the culture created from leadership, right? Being able to have that dialogue, create, sort of a safe space to be able to say, hey, I have an issue with this, or again, I've screwed up here. Here's how I'm going to fix it, and having some accountability around it. I think, is definitely a place that we try to foster, in our firm. But again, it doesn't exist in every institution, Or I'm curious to thinking of like a larger organization where you've got culture created from, let's call it management, right? General manager, maybe even manager. and the players, and even if a culture, let's say there's a toxic culture created from management, but the players band together, the players are in it together, the players have created, a locker room environment that is that is thriving. What would you say about sort of when is it possible to win in that environment, right? Where, they're almost like coming up against their opponents outside of the clubhouse and also sort of within the organization. Is it possible to win? Is it only a matter of time until that, culture needs to shift? What are your thoughts there?
It is possible to win. That does happen. It's a beautiful thing to watch teammates come together in an environment like that. That said, there are wins there that are not being had. There are wins that are not being picked up because of that poor management. And so guys like that, managers like that, typically don't last very long. They do get found and replaced.
Yeah. Because, I think about an organization, and I hear it often where the culture of an organization is not so great, but they're staying because they love their manager. They love their colleagues. They love the people that they work with. But, leadership and ownership are just not in a good place. But I love the people I work with, and that's the reason why I'm staying on. Is it just inevitable that unless, leadership changes that, somebody's going to leave that organization? Is that just, bound to happen?
We see this in sports all the time. There's the that coach that is just a mastermind that knows everything, right? So wise and knowledgeable and experienced, and who wouldn't want that guy or gal at the helm, right? And then there's that other coach that players say, that's the guy I'd run through a freaking wall for, right? Who may not know all his stuff, but that's the guy we bleed for. That's the preferred coach. That's the coach that, in my opinion, gets his players to work the most and the best.
Yeah,
it's the difference between being a transactional leader and a transformational leader. The transactional leader is, you give me this, I'll give you that in return, right? You perform for me to this degree, I'll give you this back. And that's fine, especially if they're winning. But then once that winning comes to a halt, people get fired, right? A transformational leader, on the other hand, it goes beyond that. They to the player, to the members of the team, it's clear that this leader really cares about us as people, not just as pawns or little pieces of a machine here. But he really cares about us through his questions, through their voice, through their behaviors, and that's something that some people just have, but it's also something that can be trained, that can be cultivated, that can be conditioned into anyone. Because leadership, sadly, is something that is an art and a science, and unfortunately, lots of folks in leadership positions are not formally trained in it. They're just the leader because whatever, right? They're the last person standing. They achieved this other thing. That doesn't mean that they're a good leader. I trained in medicine. We see it all the time. Just because you're the oldest, most senior person, you become the leader, but they're terrible leaders. And so,
I think of I can't help but think of our agency, Strategies for Wealth, has maintained such a high level of success, and many people outside of the agency has always told me, because I've only worked for this agency, has always said it's because of the culture, and everyone to a T would say that came from the top. The Ron Rosbrook, our now retired managing partner, and everything you said is exactly true. Like he wanted everyone to be successful, but he cared so deeply about you. At least that's how I felt, right? And I'm sure many other people felt the same way, that if you had something going on in your life or not, he was going to give you every ounce of his presence and listening. And I always left his guidance, or if we were, spent time together, feeling like he gets me. He really cares about me, and not just my business success, but my personal success with my family, and just that I grow to be a good human. And I think that kind of exacerbated throughout the culture, and that kind of thing lasts a long time, which is pretty powerful.
Yeah. Jorge, you mentioned that leadership can be something that is learned, right, or improved upon. Where would you start? What are the things that you think can be improved on if you're already in a position of leadership? And, how do you go about improving those things?
Yeah, there's so many things to do, so many places to potentially start as a leader. My highest recommendation among them would be to first become self-aware as a leader. And by that I mean being really good at noticing your own thoughts, when they're helpful, when they're not helpful, when they're not helpful, just putting them down. Being really good at allowing yourself to feel upset or nervous or whatever, and not letting that stop you from doing what's important for your team, for your organization. Um, getting really good at having awareness of where your mindset is right now. Are you really present here, or are you in the future, or are you stuck in something that happened in the past? And can you flexibly, fluidly, shift your attention to where it's needed right now? Are you able to see that the failures and achievements of today, of your organization, of you as a leader, are not really, a summary of the value of the entire organization or you? That you are greater, that the organization is greater than anything that can happen today. To be able to put things into perspective, right? And to be able to clearly, um, you know, line out your values, and share those with everyone. I think that's the work of a leader, and I think it's continual. I don't think you ever get to a mountaintop. It's constantly evolving, and the beauty of getting into that craft, right, of self awareness, is that you then become really good at becoming aware of the person in front of you, right? Whether it's a competitor or an employee, a team member, and knowing what it is that they're thinking, what it is that they're feeling, what it is that they need, so that you can better help them succeed.
I love that that's where you started. Since we recorded our last one, however long ago it was, I kept constantly thinking about how you mentioned the brain is a muscle that we can keep, that actually grows. And so I've been meditating more since we last spoke. And in fact, this morning I meditated for my longest stretch, which wasn't super long, but it was my longest stretch, which than I typically do. So I've been thinking about it a lot, and I think it's definitely helped me to quiet the mind and just be more self-aware, either when I'm thinking or when the fact that I could just be, without thinking, or just be with people. And I think a lot of people, or at least I'll speak for myself, always felt like I had to think through things. I always had to run my mind to think through things. But when in reality, if I just quiet my mind and stay in the present moment, I will find the right choice, the right decision, the right thing to say or not say, just by being better at, like you said, being in the present moment instead of past or future.
Huge, Iván.
Anyway,
Huge.
thank you. I love that you started with self-awareness as opposed to where I probably thought you'd go to some, I don't know, program or book or something that I think most people would go to when they're thinking, how do I become a better leader? Go buy a book or just spend time on it.
Yeah, it's for me. I mean, that makes a ton of sense to start there, and I think we've invested so much time, money, energy on business coaches and different entrepreneur programs to ultimately just get a better assessment of who we are, right? To who are we inherently? What kind of qualities do we have? What are we trying to become? How do we improve on those things? And then, understanding other people's qualities as well. and understanding what are the things that they love to do, what are the things that they don't like to do, what are the things that, are activities that they're uniquely qualified to be doing, and then help enhancing those things. And then like the communication in between that, right? All of us having different communication styles, things that work for us. Again, not better or worse, just different. And then, how do I get my point across or relay something? For me, that has been incredibly valuable to learn those different communication skills. Because I am what Colby would consider a very high quick start. And I'm a 9 quick start for those, that want to look it up. It's and some of the people that work for me are 2s. So there's potential for a ton of conflict when we having dialogue around new things, and understanding how to communicate the differences between those, I think has helped improve the relationship over time, not just in business, but personally, right? Joanna is a low quick start. I'm very high quick start. So, I get an idea, I'm off to the races, and she wants to run through the different scenarios for 2 weeks before we, do something. So I
love that you asked Joanna to do the Colby. Or I should do that for Lori. See how that goes.
It was super interesting. Not surprising at all, the results.
Right.
But it definitely helps kind of, again, understand that people are different. Again, not good, not bad, just different. So understanding that people are inherently different, communicate things differently, like they're not reacting that way purposefully. That's just who they are, and vice versa. So understanding how to improve that, I think, for me, has been incredibly valuable from a leadership perspective. And Jorge, just curious, like where you put communication on the scale of importance.
Oh, it's I put that second then after self-awareness now, right? It's how do I then take this wonderful self-awareness I've gained and apply it, right? To the people I'm interacting with through communication. And I think that if you can improve the relationship with your own inner workings, with your thoughts and emotions, what's helpful, what's not, how is that not going to help your interactions with the people in front of you, your relationships, right? And if it's helping your relationships with people, how is that not going to help your business, your organization? This thing, it just all trickles outward, right? And the electrons that connect all this is the way we communicate. And so, I think one effective way to communicate first is being able to identify for yourself, what is it that the person in front of me is thinking and feeling, so that whatever comes out of your mouth next can show that you really care about them. Like you feel what they're saying, you empathize, right? You can kind of understand where they're coming from, even if you disagree. I understand where you're coming from on this one. Guards go down. Now you can talk. Now you can really communicate. And then, one way of communicating that's really helpful, in my opinion, is assuming that the person in front of you already knows the solution. They already know what they got to do. And so how do you get that out of them without telling them what to do? Because nobody really likes being told what to do, for the most part. It's offensive, right? It's just asking them. So how do you think that went? What do you think we should do next? Let them tell you. How can I help you do that? Awesome.
Yeah, you get a different level of buy-in when somebody else comes up with the solution versus being told what to do. The level of commitment, the level of buy-in there is significantly different if they are the ones, driving that sort of investigative process.
Yeah, and if in that questioning, right, what do you think we should do? What do you think you could do? What should we change here? And if it becomes clear that the answer is not there, but you first have to assume that it was, to get that empathy, right? That leader that I'm going to run through a wall for. If it's really not there, then offering rather than telling. Well, in that case, John, I have a suggestion that I've seen work for other people. Would you be interested in hearing it?
Yeah.
They always say yes. And then after you propose it, how does that sound? Or how did that land? And they're almost always going to say, that's a good idea. That sounds good to me. I think I'll try that.
Yeah, they essentially came up with that suggestion themselves in that respect, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's building people up. It's not, you're not pulling people. You're just standing next to them and seeing the landscape together and solving it together.
Yeah.
Um,
So we've touched on that sort of the inner work, right, that it takes to identify our own qualities and our own setbacks, and just sort of being more aware of that. And then we talked a little bit about communication. Is there anything else that we're missing, or any one or two things that you think the listening audience really should focus on as they either lead an organization or try to become a better leader?
Or try to avoid.
Yeah.
I think that as a leader, people are constantly looking at you and constantly trying to read you and, trying to thermometer, find out how you're doing so that they can then calculate what they should do. And so, do you guys have favorite appetizers?
Appetizers. I guess depends where we're going.
Evan,
What we're eating.
what's your favorite appetizer, Evan?
I'll say French onion soup.
Awesome.
play
I
along.
asked you because last time your answer for dessert was
Yeah, still
and
thinking about that.
so many brownies since then. I thought of you.
Yeah.
So French onion soup, right?
Mhm.
Um, you know, something I've learned is that appetizers are important, not just because they're delicious and they buy time for cooking the main meal. They also influence the flavor of what you're going to eat for the main course.
Mm.
And as a proof of principle of this, let's just imagine eating garbage as an appetizer.
Okay.
I don't care how well that steak is.
Yeah.
It's going to taste pretty awful,
Yeah.
right? And so, in that same way, as a leader, your appetizer is kind of like your personal life, right? If you're having issues at home with your spouse, with your kids,
Mhm.
with your physical health, it's gonna affect the taste buds of the entree when you get to work, and people are gonna read that, and people are gonna respond to that, even if it's not obvious to you.
Mhm.
And so, my biggest advice is keep working on yourself, and it's infectious. People start doing it with you.
Mm.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jorge, listen, really, really appreciate the time as always. Super valuable. We're grateful to have you back on. Really, really appreciate the time and the energy that you brought to it. If folks wanted to contact you for further advice or other services that you offer, where can they find out more about you, and where can they connect with you?
I'm easy to find. Google my name, LinkedIn. Just send me a message.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Jorge,
Okay.
we really, really appreciate you, man. Thank you so much for coming on board and for joining us. And thank you to the listening audience for tuning in. Make sure to click subscribe below to be notified when we come out with our next episode. Appreciate you guys.